Catherine, pretty shocking. 18 LNG exports now approved, but the analysis shows, you know what, it's not as good as we thought. What did you find?
That's right. I mean, the U.S. right now is in the middle of a massive fossil fuel build-out, and LNG is a huge part of that. So when we went and looked at what would be the carbon emissions from this build-out, we found that simply operating these 18 plants would emit as much carbon dioxide as 18 gigawatts of coal-fired power, or roughly the same as 24 coal plants. So those numbers don't even include the emissions that you would generate from transporting the gas from the wellhead or burning it at its final destination. So it kind of raises some questions about whether exporting the gas, this gas export boom that we're in the midst of, is really worth the potential cost it could mean to the environment.
And interestingly enough, you found that some plants are reporting higher emissions than others. Why the discrepancy?
That's right. So I think it's important to note that it is possible for these plants to reduce their carbon footprint if they want to. The worst polluters in our analysis were those that chose to generate electricity by burning fossil fuels rather than using renewable energy, and those that chose to vent excess methane instead of capturing it and reusing it. There were some plants in the analysis that had pretty low emissions because they rely on renewables and capture the gas. But right now there isn't really a regulatory incentive for the worst polluters to make the investments necessary to reduce their footprint.
You know, Catherine, all the bad news aside, there has been some talk that at least the U.S. LNG exports would help reduce carbon emissions abroad. Does that help ease any of these worries?
A little bit. So, you know, the government has done some studies that show that LNG exported from the U.S. have lower life cycle emissions than coal that is mined locally in China, for instance. But when we looked at the numbers, it showed that that gap is actually pretty narrow, and it's getting even smaller as U.S. natural gas production becomes more emissions intense through increased venting and flaring. So the answer is yes, but we are also approaching a point where the emissions benefits of exported LNG versus coal will eventually disappear.